Welcome everyone to another episode of We Are Being Transformed. Contrary to popular opinion, this is not a Transformers podcast. The show is about the interaction and dynamic cultural exchange between human beings and the ritual, cult, and religions around them, specifically the world of antiquity. And today we have a very amazing show for you. I'm very excited and honored to be joined not only once again by the Yamblikian teacher himself, Dr. Matthew David Litwa. Welcome again to the show.
Thank you, Jason. Real pleasure to be here.
And we also have an incredible treat for you. As many of you know, I'm a huge fan of the SWAP, Secret History of Western Esotericism podcast. And we are joined today by the one, the only, he is staying esoteric by having his camera off, Earl Fontanelle. How are you doing today, Earl?
Dun, dun, dun. Very well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. So today we're going to be talking about a subject that these gentlemen here know a thing or two about, which is the esoteric and Philo. We're not just going to touch on that, but we're going to talk about a multitude of things because you can go so many ways with Philo. So I will just start off with a question that has been long debated, Dr. Litwa, in scholarship. Just how esoteric, psychedelically speaking, Philo is. Philo was not above, as we've seen in certain texts, like in the Special Laws 3, he was not above the psychonautic gonzo ecstatic experiences. You know, he has that kind of hot trip to the third heaven, like Paul in 2 Corinthians 12. But overall, it seems to me that he's really focused more on ethical concerns. What is your take on the kind of psychedelic, trippy experiences in Philo, Dr. Litwa?
Well, I think Philo is really this masterpiece in patient creativity. He is not at all claiming on most occasions to be spreading any kind of revealed knowledge from heaven. His text, his Torah, is the revelation received from heaven in the past, and so he is a commentator. But I think for Philo, which would be different than some people, is occasionally he does claim to be inspired, and he describes at one point his experience as a writer, which I think a lot of writers can really sympathize with. He says at one point that he comes and sits down at his desk feeling full and starts the process of writing or dictating, however exactly he did it, and everything just comes out stilted and worn out and non-creative. And then there are other times where Philo says he felt absolutely empty and tired, and he just started writing, and he felt like he was on the winds of the wings of the wind, and the divine spirit had sort of roosted in his mind, and he was in a rocket ship, and just he didn't know where the stuff was coming from. So he
says he's born aloft
that.
from the heavens and earth, right? Like
Yes,
he says, the Urano and the Kai Cosmo. He's just high above, like looking down on the earth.
He says this in contrast to it. I mean, it seems to be, you can't tell if he's speaking literally here. This is in the Special Laws 3. You can't tell if he's speaking literally here or metaphorically, because his main metaphor is to contrast his political life, which he expresses as sort of being submerged in an ocean, versus his contemplative writing career, which he's basically saying, I mean, it's a complaint basically that there was a time where I was, exalted into the air and, riding around with sun and moon and looking down on earthly concerns as if I didn't care. But now I'm submerged and I can barely breathe and I'm drowning. And it's just, I guess it's the feeling probably of most academics today. I mean, our creativity is being, squeezed out of us because We are now slaves of email and of, organizing conferences and uploading papers and writing calls for
Amen.
papers. And, and in the end, we just are running on nothing at the end of the day. And I think, Philo is expressing this great woe that he says there was a time where I was just in the air all day, and now I'm barely breathing. So what is he really saying there? I mean, I don't know. Is he claiming some kind of actual experience like we see with Paul in 2 Corinthians 12? I'm not sure. My reading is that on occasion Philo claimed something like inspiration, but I think that's the Spirit coming down to him. And I would be a little bit hesitant to say that he ever really claimed to mentally go up to his intelligible world, the intelligible Sinai. But he definitely thinks that Moses did that, and he is that faithful interpreter of Moses.
We are going to talk about Moses very shortly, but Earl, I wanted to get your thoughts on that subject.
Yeah, it's amazing. In this context, what you're saying about the complaint about, I just don't have time to do this anymore, is super relevant and interesting. And he makes the same complaint in the piece about when he was the ambassador to Gaius at Rome. I can't remember what the piece
Embassy
is
to
called.
Gaius, yep.
The legacy embassy. There you go.
The embassy, yep. Or
And he says,
legatio, yep.
I used to be able to do that, and I can't do it anymore now, basically. But then there's another parallel text, which is in what is it? It's in the Life of Moses, I want to say. It's the one where he talks about it's commentary on Genesis. He's talking about how we are made, this classic bit of the Old Testament, we are made in the image of God. And he says, so how so? Well, because we have a nous, a special cognitive faculty. And God, that's what God is. God is a nous. And because the human, the essence of the human is a nous, it's capable of flying or leaving the body behind, going toward God, and doing something not that dissimilar to what we see in the Merkava texts. Basically getting close, but in a completely different register, in a Greek, a completely Hellenic register. This doesn't read like apocalyptic at all, but you still have that kind of vision of the kavod, like this sort of, you go up as a nous, you see like the beauties of the world of forms, the Phaedrus is referenced, and then there's this kind of amazing vision of light upon light that's so bright that it's not even light anymore, and then he tails off with a nice little apophatic, doesn't say what he's going to say. That's in the commentary on Genesis, I believe. I wish I had the text in front of me. It's worth reading. But
Philo is so vast in terms of his literary output. Like, it's kind of hard to know exactly what he's saying sometimes because he's contradicting himself wherever. But yeah, you're right about that. And we were talking, Dr. Little was talking about like how scholars today feel that. I feel like Philo really used the exemplum of the figure of was it Joseph as the consummate politician. Like he used like this triad of figures. Moses was like the ultimate lawgiver, and then I think it was Joseph who was the ultimate. But yeah, one of them was like the politician, and the politician is always constantly being pulled from here to there.
Joseph. Yep.
Joseph. Yeah, that was a fantastic contrast.
But the question, I think the question, just to follow up on what Earl said, which is fantastic, is there shouldn't be anything necessarily esoteric about this, because this is part of our cognitive hardware. And I think the problem is people don't access those hardware programs, because for Philo, the Platonists, they are embedded in the outer sensory experiences of the material world. They are running games on their software, unaware of this, gold jewel in the center of their selves, which can, yes, give them direct access to the divine world. Maybe not the existent, but maybe to the logos and the logoi, or angels or whatnot.
Yeah. And it may be that the reason the Platonists have access to this realm, or at least intimations of it, right? Or if we take Philo as a model here, and maybe add Plotinus in, to a greater or lesser degree all the time, but not all the time, right? Even Plotinus is sort of said that he kind of falls down and then goes back to the nous, and he's not there all the time. But these guys are trained to access these parts of cognition, right? They're systematically trained to do this. So
I just mean in terms of like you look at something like Paul, like I was making the analogy to Second Corinthians, and so you look at something like the Ascent, like the Merkava, like Philo, like you were mentioning the Merkava literature, and Philo really reminds me. I mean, I think if I had to make a good example, Philo is the best example of if Plotinus wrote Merkava literature. Like he's very contemplative and inward. I was talking to, but yeah, not in terms of psychedelics. I was talking more like just when you compare him to something like when you read Allogenes or any of those other ascent type of text, and Nag Hammadi or Paul. But yeah, like I was talking to Ed Watts about this, and he was saying, yeah, there's two different kinds of Neoplatonism. You have the Iamblichian theurgical, and then you have the Platinian, because we were talking about Hypatia and what kind of Neoplatonist she was. And she was very much in the Platinian camp. And I can very much see Philo the same way. He's more of a contemplative, inward, striving for virtue and understanding. So
I think, when we ask the question, well, is he really, is he describing an experience, or is he being metaphorical or something like that? We started out with that, question. And I get that question, but what does it mean to be metaphorical about an inner experience? I mean, I feel like until we know what the experience of nous is, and this is something we take very seriously when we read the Platonists, right? If we don't, if they're saying it's like ascending out of the body and sort of entering into the plot of Plato's Phaedrus for a minute, like that's kind of what it's like. On the one hand, they're already speaking in a realm of metaphor, but on the other hand, they are using a canonical trope to describe these experiences that they're all training themselves to get at. So I feel like maybe the question is, to what degree can we kind of convincingly talk about Philo in terms, at least in some way, analogous to things we're more used to talking about as meditation traditions. Stuff like yoga and Buddhist practices, which we when we say this is a meditation tradition, you kind of know what that is about to some degree, right? I think that's maybe the lens to look at this stuff through, or it's a helpful lens anyway.
Yeah, I agree. You could, Go ahead.
Meditation is really psychedelic, is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's right. And you could use the word metaphor in a sort of dismissive sense, as if it's just a metaphor, but his literary creativity in making the metaphor doesn't deny that he was having an experience. And I think you're right on target, that it was a deeply meditative and contemplative experience, as genuine as any other psychedelic experience. And whether he was aware or not of leaving his body, I think, if you were watching Philo, you would have seen just a man sitting in a room and nothing really going on. But yes, his inner experience was a vibrant rainbow, and he might have perceived himself quite literally in some other place, because the nous can travel faster than the speed of light, and can appear in different realms of the universe. And he literally believed that, because he believed that the nous was immaterial and could do that.
Yeah. Well, it's like, how would he not believe it? That seems really odd to us, and we can't help but to think of some kind of soul flight metaphor, like Doctor Strange, sending out his astral form, which is like a ghost version of him that flies around. But
Yeah, you see that in Dion Fortune too later, much
right on,
later
yeah.
down the line. But yeah, her astral.
If you just go back to what he says is, or what they say, because this is really common, like leaving the body behind doesn't, I mean, we've all left the body behind, I would say, when we're like, if you're caught up in a really good book and you're totally unaware of anything happening, like how if you're in a really good book, you can be sitting in a totally uncomfortable chair, leaning and like getting a crick in your neck, and you just sit there, and at some point you go, fuck, my neck really hurts, but you don't care. You keep saying you have to pee, but you don't get up for like 3 hours. Isn't that an experience of leaving the body that we can all access on a very normal, that just happens to, or if you're listening to really good music or whatever. So leaving the body behind is not that far away maybe from everyday experience, but it is very potentially profound. Like it can go deeper than just reading a good book and getting lost in the plot and forgetting where you are for a little while.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. It's in the Corpus Hermeticum too. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. Yeah, it's in the Hermetica.
This idea of being, I mean, in the Corpus Hermeticum, I think it's 11. This idea of, if you want to be in India, you can be in India, and you don't have to leave your room, because you can send your mind to India. And they literally believe that. And I think for most people, they would experience this on really vivid dreams. Yeah, that would be the proof on a popular level. Yeah.